On a quiet Tuesday afternoon in suburban Connecticut, 7-year-old Ryan sat at the kitchen table drawing when he suddenly stopped mid-stroke. His mother, Lisa, noticed him staring at his hand with an expression she had never seen before, something distant and deeply unsettled. "Mom, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice carrying a weight that seemed impossible for a child his age. "I wasn't always Ryan. I used to be someone else. Someone famous." Lisa set down the dish she was drying and sat across from him. Her instinct telling her this was a moment that required her full attention. Ryan looked directly into her eyes with unsettling clarity. "I was John Lennon, and I remember the night I died." The room seemed to contract around those words. Lisa felt her heart accelerate but forced herself to remain calm. "Tell me what you remember," she said quietly, pulling out her phone to record what came next. Ryan began describing a December evening, the cold air, the feeling of coming home after being in the recording studio. He talked about walking through an archway, about hearing someone call out a name, about turning around. Then his voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I felt the shots. 4 of them. One in the back, then more. I fell forward. There was so much pain, but also this strange feeling like I was already leaving, like I was watching from somewhere else." He touched his left shoulder and his lower back with precision. "Here and here. That's where it hurt the most." Lisa felt her hands trembling as she held the phone steady. Ryan had never shown any particular interest in the Beatles. They didn't play classic rock in their home. Their musical diet consisted of current pop music and Disney soundtracks. She and her husband David had mentioned John Lennon perhaps once in passing, and certainly never discussed the circumstances of his death with their 7-year-old son. Yet here was Ryan, describing details with a specificity that sent chills down her spine. He talked about the feeling of the pavement against his face, the taste of blood, the sound of someone screaming his name. Yoko's voice, he said, though Lisa had never mentioned that name to him. That evening, after Ryan had gone to bed, Lisa sat with David and played the recording. David's initial reaction was skepticism tinged with concern. Maybe he saw something online, heard something at school. But as they talked it through, they realized Ryan's access to such information was limited and carefully monitored. More troubling were the details he provided that went beyond what would be in a simple news article. The emotional texture of the memories, the sensory details, the intimate quality of what he described. David suggested they document everything carefully, but avoid leading questions or providing Ryan with additional information that might contaminate whatever was happening. Over the following weeks, Ryan provided more details unprompted. He talked about a childhood in Liverpool, about a mother named Julia who was killed when he was a teenager. He described the feeling of performing, the relationship with Paul, the creative tension that felt both productive and exhausting. He spoke about Yoko with a tenderness that seemed beyond his years, describing her as the person who understood the parts of himself he kept hidden from the world. He mentioned Sean, his younger son, and the guilt he felt about not being present enough for his first son, Julian. These weren't just facts. They carried emotional weight, personal regret, intimate knowledge of relationships. Lisa contacted Dr. Michael Torres, a psychiatrist who specialized in childhood memory phenomena at Yale University. Dr. Torres had spent 20 years studying cases of children who claimed past life memories, approaching each case with rigorous skepticism while remaining open to evidence. He agreed to meet with Ryan and his family. The initial interview took place in the Torres family living room, deliberately casual to help Ryan feel comfortable. Dr. Torres asked Ryan to simply talk about what he remembered, offering no prompts or leading questions. Ryan sat on the couch, his small hands folded in his lap, and began speaking with that same unsettling clarity his mother had first witnessed. He described the Dakota Building in New York, the specific archway entrance, the feeling of living in that particular apartment. When Dr. Torres showed him a series of photographs, mixing images of the Dakota with similar Gothic-style buildings, Ryan immediately identified the correct one and pointed to a specific entrance. "That's where I walked in that night," he said quietly. Dr. Torres noted that this entrance, while visible in some photographs, wasn't the building's most photographed or recognizable feature. The psychiatrist then asked about the shooting itself. Ryan's description matched the documented events with disturbing accuracy. He talked about coming back from the record plant studio, about signing an autograph for someone earlier that day, the same person who would later shoot him. When Dr. Torres asked how he knew it was the same person, Ryan said he remembered the face, the energy, something that fell off even in that brief earlier interaction. Historical records confirmed that Mark David Chapman had indeed approached Lennon for an autograph earlier on December 8, 1980, and that Lennon had obliged. Ryan described the moment of impact with visceral detail. He talked about falling forward onto his chest, about being carried by someone into the security office, about the awareness that he was dying. "I remember thinking about Sean," he said, his voice breaking in a way that seemed far too knowing for a 7-year-old. "He was only 5. I kept thinking he wouldn't remember me." Dr. Torres observed Ryan carefully. The boy's effect matched the content of his memories. Genuine grief, regret, a sense of life interrupted. This wasn't a child playing pretend or seeking attention. This was someone processing trauma. Over several sessions, Dr. Torres employed various verification strategies. He showed Ryan photographs of people from John Lennon's life, mixed with images of similar-looking individuals from the same era. Ryan consistently identified the correct people and often provided context about their relationships. When shown a photograph of George Harrison, Ryan's face softened. "George was complicated," he said. "We hurt each other sometimes, but there was real love there. We grew up together." When Dr. Torres later reviewed interviews with people who had known Lennon and Harrison, he found this characterization matched their accounts. The relationship had been complex, marked by both deep affection and periods of tension. Dr. Torres also presented Ryan with musical equipment from different eras. When shown a Rickenbacker 325 guitar, the model Lennon had used extensively, Ryan's face lit up with recognition. He didn't just identify it. He talked about how it felt to play it, the weight of it, the particular sound it produced. He mentioned modifications he had made to his own instrument, details that matched technical specifications Dr. Torres later confirmed through music historians. When given a chance to hold a guitar, Ryan's hands moved to positions consistent with Lennon's playing style. Though he couldn't actually play, his 7-year-old hands lacked the muscle memory and coordination. The investigation expanded to include Dr. Sarah Whitman, a researcher from the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies, a department that had been systematically studying cases of children who reported past life memories since the 1960s. Dr. Whitman brought decades of experience examining similar cases. She interviewed Ryan separately from Dr. Torres, looking for consistency in his accounts and testing for details that couldn't be easily accessed through normal means. She was particularly interested in information that wasn't widely published, personal details, private moments, aspects of Lennon's life that hadn't made it into mainstream biographies. Ryan described a memory of being in bed with Yoko, listening to the rain, feeling a rare moment of peace. He talked about the apartment's specific layout, describing a white room where they would spend mornings. Dr. Whitman later confirmed through interviews with people who had visited the Lennon-Ono apartment that this matched the actual layout and that Lennon and Ono had indeed maintained a predominantly white bedroom. This detail, while not secret, wasn't prominently featured in public accounts of their lives. He also described emotional textures that were harder to verify, but rang true to people who had known Lennon. Ryan talked about the constant pressure of public expectation, the way being a Beatle felt like wearing armor he could never remove. He described the relief and fear of leaving the band, the creative freedom mixed with uncertainty. When Ryan spoke about this, Dr. Whitman noted his language patterns temporarily shifted. He used turns of phrase and verbal rhythms that seemed inconsistent with a contemporary 7-year-old American child, carrying instead a quality that people who had known Lennon described as characteristic of his speaking style. The research team considered alternative explanations. Cryptomnesia, the phenomenon where forgotten memories appear as novel experiences, was a possibility, but Ryan's parents maintained detailed records of his media exposure, and none of it provided access to the specific details he was reporting. fantasy, or attention-seeking behavior typically presented differently in children, lacking the emotional consistency and resistance to elaboration that Ryan demonstrated. When children fabricated stories, they usually expanded them over time, adding dramatic elements. Ryan's accounts remained stable, and he seemed more burdened than excited by his memories. Dissociative identity disorder was considered, but Ryan showed no other signs of the condition. No time loss, no distinct personality states, no evidence of trauma in his current life that might trigger such a response. His memories of being John Lennon existed alongside his full awareness of being Ryan. He never confused his current identity with his claimed past identity. He would say things like, "When I was John Lennon, I like this, but as Ryan, I prefer that," demonstrating clear distinction between the two experiences. Dr. Torres arranged for Ryan to meet with May Pang, who had been Lennon's companion during his separation from Yoko Ono in the mid-1970s. The meeting was structured carefully, with Pang unaware of the specific claims Ryan had made. She was told only that they were studying a child who claimed memories related to someone she had known. During their conversation, Ryan mentioned specific details about the period Pang and Lennon had spent together in Los Angeles, the house they had lived in, a particular dinner party, the feeling of that time being both liberating and ultimately unsustainable. Pang's reaction was documented on video. Her eyes filled with tears as Ryan described moments she had never publicly discussed in detail. He mentioned a conversation they'd had about fear, John's fear of not being taken seriously as an artist after the Beatles, the way that fear drove him but also paralyzed him sometimes. Pang confirmed this was something Lennon had shared with her privately, not something that appeared in her published memoir. "How does he know this?" she asked Dr. Torres, her voice shaking. "How could he possibly know this?" The case attracted attention from the broader research community, with scientists offering various theoretical frameworks. Some proposed that Ryan might be accessing information through some form of collective unconscious, a pool of shared human memory that Carl Jung had theorized about. Others suggested quantum consciousness models, where information might persist in ways we don't yet understand. Skeptics maintained that even seemingly inexplicable details could be explained through unconscious information gathering. Perhaps Ryan had overheard conversations, seen documentary footage in passing, or encountered information online that he had processed without conscious awareness. Dr. Whitman conducted an experiment to test this latter hypothesis. She provided Ryan's parents with carefully curated false information about Lennon, plausible-sounding details that were actually invented. She wanted to see if Ryan would incorporate these false details into his memories. Over 2 months, Ryan's parents occasionally mentioned these fabricated facts in casual conversation. Ryan never incorporated them. When one of the false details came up directly, Ryan corrected it. "That's not right," he said. "It wasn't like that." This resistance to suggestion was significant. It suggested his memories weren't simply constructed from available information, but had their own internal consistency. As Ryan approached his 8th birthday, a shift began to occur. The memories started to fade, becoming less vivid and more distant. This pattern had been observed in other documented cases. Past life memories in children typically peaked between ages 5 and 8, then gradually receded as the child became more fully integrated into their current life. Ryan talked about this change with something like relief. "It's getting quieter," he told his mother. "I still remember, but it doesn't feel as real anymore. It's like it happened to someone else now." Lisa and David faced the challenge of helping their son integrate these experiences into his developing identity. They consulted with child psychologists about how to support him without either dismissing his experiences or allowing them to dominate his sense of self. They emphasized that whatever Ryan had experienced, whether memories of a past life or something else entirely, he was Ryan now, living Ryan's life with his own path to forge. Ryan seemed to understand this intuitively. He began to speak about his Lennon memories the way one might speak about a movie they'd seen, something that had happened but wasn't happening anymore. The shooting memory itself became less traumatic over time. Ryan learned that he could acknowledge it without being consumed by it. Dr. Torres helped him develop language to discuss these experiences with peers when necessary, simple explanations that didn't invite mockery or excessive attention. Some kids remember dreams really clearly, Ryan learned to say. I remember things from before I was born really clearly. It's kind of like that. This framing helped him maintain social relationships while honoring his own experience. By the time Ryan turned 9, the memories had receded to the point where they felt more like photographs he could look at than experiences he was living. The research team conducted final interviews, documenting the trajectory of his memories and their eventual integration. Dr. Whitman noted that Ryan's case was among the most evidential she had studied. The combination of specific verifiable details, emotional authenticity, and behavioral consistency suggested something genuinely anomalous was occurring, even if the precise mechanism remained unclear. The researchers published their findings in the Journal of Consciousness Studies, carefully documenting the case while acknowledging the limitations of any such investigation. They couldn't prove Ryan had been John Lennon in a past life. What they could demonstrate was that a 7-year-old boy with limited exposure to information about John Lennon had provided specific, verifiable details about Lennon's life and death, details that included private moments and emotional textures that matched accounts from people who had known Lennon personally. They documented the consistency of his accounts over time, his resistance to suggestion, and the gradual fading of memories that occurred as he matured, all patterns consistent with other well-documented cases of children reporting past life memories. The case raised profound questions about the nature of consciousness and memory. If consciousness persists beyond physical death, what mechanism allows it to enter a new body? How does information transfer? Why do some children seem to carry these memories while others don't? Why do the memories fade? These questions remain unanswered, residing at the intersection of neuroscience, psychology, and philosophy, where current scientific paradigms struggle to provide adequate explanations. For Lisa and David, the experience transformed their understanding of consciousness and identity. They hadn't sought this out. They had no particular beliefs about reincarnation before Ryan's revelations. But they couldn't dismiss what they had witnessed. Their son's genuine distress when recounting traumatic memories, his recognition of people and places he shouldn't have known, the way his language and effect temporarily shifted when discussing his claimed past life. Whether this constituted proof of reincarnation or evidence of some other phenomenon they couldn't name, it had happened, and it had been real. Ryan himself, now a teenager, looks back on his childhood memories with a mixture of acceptance and mystery. He knows what he experienced, but he's learned that not everything requires explanation or proof. The memories are part of his story, part of what shaped his empathy and his awareness that consciousness might be more complex than conventional wisdom suggests. He plays guitar now, drawn to music in a way that feels both natural and slightly haunted. Sometimes when he's playing, he'll hit a chord progression that feels deeply familiar, like remembering something from a dream, and he'll wonder if somewhere in the mystery of consciousness, some fragment of John Lennon's creative spirit found its way forward into another life, another chance to make music, to love, to be. The case remains in the files of the Division of Perceptual Studies, one of thousands of documented cases of children reporting past life memories. Each case raises the same fundamental questions about who we are, what consciousness means, and whether the boundary between lives is as absolute as we assume. Science may one day provide answers, may develop tools sophisticated enough to measure whatever allows these memories to persist and transfer. Until then, we're left with stories like Ryan's, carefully documented, rigorously investigated, and profoundly mysterious accounts that challenge our assumptions about the nature of existence itself. If you want to explore more cases like Ryan's, stories of consciousness that transcend conventional understanding, children who remember lives that shouldn't be possible to remember, and the scientific investigation of phenomena that exist at the very edge of what we can explain, subscribe to this channel. We're committed to examining these mysteries with both open-minded curiosity and rigorous skepticism, because the truth, whatever it turns out to be, deserves nothing less than our most careful attention. Join us as we continue investigating the boundaries of consciousness, one extraordinary case at a time.